Guys, it's a pivotal moment in the channel. I'm going to talk about my computer. Wow, what a shocker, right? Longtime viewers of the channel know that I typically don't talk about my current setup. I don't think I ever have, to be honest. But I want to say that I started using KDE Plasma a couple months ago, and I've actually been incredibly impressed with just with a little bit of setup. KDE Plasma can become the desktop environment for you and is possibly like the most customizable desktop environment that ever existed on Linux. KDE also is a powerhouse in the Linux desktop and coming strong through things like Valve Steam Deck, or even as the flagship desktop environment in OpenSUSE's desktop spins. KDE is also one of the oldest desktop environments in Linux, and it also receives a good majority of its funding from companies like Google, Canonical, and Tuxedo. So longtime viewers of the channel will know that I used to use the awesome window manager and GNOME in the past, and I've never gone into detail about this change. I also have an NVIDIA graphics card, and I've simply been seeking for the thing that runs it best. Because I also want to be an advocate of you should do whatever works for you, but at the same time, we need to be able to look towards things that can do what we can better, so we aren't just sticks in the mud using like the same crusty old technology that literally brought planes to the ground in the United States. The truth is that most Linux desktop environments or window managers are just not prepared for the future or don't see enough development. One of the major reasons that I switched to using KDE is largely because of Wayland. Of the major desktop environments and window managers that support Wayland, there's GNOME and Sway, and like GNOME and Sway, KDE promotes and supports using Wayland as a display protocol, which is a secure and cleaner display system for the modern age. And when you look at many other desktop environments like Cinnamon or Pantheon or Budgie, just a lot of other desktop environments and even window managers are just not prepared for Wayland. They don't have any implementations of Wayland, and there's not even any plans to implement it in the future. Wayland is substantially more secure than using X11, and it also provides like new features like, say, fractional scaling, HDR support, and is just overall like looks and feels a lot better than using X11. And we need to be using Wayland because the development of Xorg has hit an all-time low in December of 2022, so we need to stop using it whenever possible. Now, some of you will be like, but wait, you just said that you have an NVIDIA GPU, and anyone who has even remotely tried to do anything on Linux will know that using NVIDIA on Linux is a massive pain in the rear end. But in reality, in order to get KDE to accept the proprietary NVIDIA drivers, I had to make 0 changes to get it to work. I actually experimented with KDE 5.25 back on Fedora 36, and NVIDIA was just not functional at all. Like, it would literally just kick you back out to the display manager. But of course, this can also just be because I have an incredibly common computer. I actually frequently get asked like what my computer actually is, but if you want to know, go look up the Cyberpunk 2077 benchmark computers, and if anyone doesn't know, it's a video game. Basically, I have the same exact computer, but except instead of running Windows 10, I'm running Fedora 37, and instead of running 16 gigabytes of RAM, I'm actually using 32 gigabytes of RAM because I do a lot of video editing. Your mileage may vary, but if you use an older KDE version from another stable distribution, do not expect Wayland to work because KDE, Wayland, and NVIDIA will not get along on any version of KDE below 5.26. The other reason I switched to KDE is for a tiling window manager. I mean, of course, every nerd likes a tiling window manager, but it's, you know, why not use something like the Sway window manager? Well, the Sway window manager has refused to support the proprietary NVIDIA driver, so they are completely off the table. I totally understand why they don't support it, but for my current setup and for what I need, that is just not acceptable. Now, I know there are workarounds you can do in Sway, but just the fact that it will never be officially supported is just one thing that's gonna scare me off forever. I don't appreciate people gating people's like software or hardware choices, but I don't blame them for it. NVIDIA's awful.
And NVIDIA has been the single worst company we've ever dealt with.
Because I couldn't use Sway, that sent me crawling over to GNOME. Anyone who's seen videos when I was using GNOME, you can actually use System76's GNOME shell extension, Pop Shell. And I've never covered it in depth, but it adds like a pseudo tiling functionality to GNOME. And when I say pseudo tiling, I mean it's more like tiling, but it's still like a little annoying to move windows around. And I'll freely admit, using Pop Shell is an objective downgrade from using any other window manager. But I did it because I want to experience NVIDIA. I want to experience NVIDIA's proprietary drivers on Wayland. For content, of course. But System76 rocked the Linux desktop space by announcing the creation of their own desktop environment, Cosmic. And this actually got me really worried, because if System76 is going to be dropping GNOME soon, what's going to become the state of the Pop Shell GNOME extension, which I actually rely on to get tiling windows? I can't find a single other reputable GNOME shell extension which does something similar. Yes, I am aware that System76 wants to support Wayland. They want to support their proprietary NVIDIA drivers, and they're going to do it through their new Cosmic desktop environment, but it's going to take time for that to propagate into other Linux distros. For perspective, like, because I use Fedora, and I've also used Arch Linux in the past, it took years for the newer desktop environments like Budgie or Elementary OS's Pantheon desktop environment to propagate into the repositories of Fedora and Arch Linux. And because this stuff doesn't happen overnight, they need to get people who are able to put that up onto servers and let other people use it. And then there's also some naysayers out there who might have some point, which is Cosmic, because it's maintained by System76, who's a relatively small company here in Colorado in the United States, that they might suffer the same fate that the Unity desktop environment did at the hands of Canonical. I don't think that will actually happen. These people are probably naysaying. They don't even know. We're just gonna have to wait and see. Now, on the other hand, KDE has pledged to support a new API which allows built-in window tiling without the assistance of an extension. And this API is now actually built into newer versions of KDE. This functionality is now in KDE, but we still have to wait for developers to catch up and adapt their extensions to work with it and have KDE work on their own built-in functionality of window tiling. So I've actually been using the KDE extension Bismuth, which actually has a native package in Fedora. Moving from Pop Shell to Bismuth is a night and day difference, because Pop Shell requires that you press a particular set of keys like Super Shift Enter to enter a window moving mode, and then you use the arrow keys or HKJL to move your windows around. It's a lot of keystrokes, but like a dynamic tiling window manager like Bismuth only requires one key shortcut in order to shuffle windows around. And since Bismuth is around and KDE added these new APIs to support window tiling, I can now rest assured that I can use the NVIDIA proprietary driver on Wayland in KDE with the window tiling that I want so badly. I also do want to make clear that GNOME has treated me well, and I can say it's been one of the most solid desktop experiences that I have ever had. But a lot of people, including myself, don't like having GNOME's vision, especially when their vision doesn't necessarily align with my own. For example, you can't export your GNOME key bindings through the GUI. Instead, you need to run some dconf commands to output your keys into a file, and then you use that file, and then you have to enter another dconf command to load it onto your new device or your new desktop environment. KDE actually opens up this option so that you can choose to do all of these things through a graphical environment and through the command line. Another thing KDE does is they let you set a default terminal, which GNOME doesn't let you do. They let you have more than 4 desktops accessible at one time. I have 9, and they're all accessible via key bindings. GNOME actually only lets you access 4 desktops via key bindings. KDE also lets you customize your desktop to a great degree, and traditionally, you might have seen this from previous videos, I typically gravitate towards Ubuntu Unity's layout because I always feel like it makes better use of the shorter end of the screen, but I actually stopped because of the way my current multi-monitor setup works, and I've actually switched to using a setup that's pretty much like Windows 11, you know, despite what some people will say about Windows 11 and not liking it. And the only difference is, instead of being nagged by the weather widget, I have actually my 9 desktops, which tells me which Windows is open and which. you're probably wondering, you're using the NVIDIA proprietary driver. This can't have been 100% smooth for you. What's the catches? There has to be a catch if you're using the proprietary NVIDIA driver on Wayland, on KDE. Well, what are the problems that I might encounter or the things that I might have? Okay, I'm going to talk about some of them now, and I'm just going to try to give you my personal experience. I cannot guarantee that you will actually encounter this, but I just want to make it clear. Okay, first, KDE has errors when you log out of your computer. And if you log out of your computer, you will just get a black screen, and there is no way to fix it other than to hard reset your computer. Now, this is an issue that only exists in 5.26 and below, but as I have been told, it has been fixed in 5.27, but Arch Linux is the only distro that ships 5.27, so I'm gonna have to wait. But I only have one user on my computer. But if you have kids or something, I'm sure this would bother you. So maybe you should consider using GNOME. Using Firefox will actually cause Firefox to crash after like a few seconds. And the only way to fix this is you need to add a environment variable into your .bashrc or zshrc in order to get it to work. And I also want to comment too, this has been a struggle, Chromium apps or Electron apps, so I'll throw a couple, or even just apps that let you screen share. Examples like Signal, the Signal private messenger app, Brave, the browser, they do not let you share your screen. And this is because XDG portals, which is a standard in the XDG desktop, are not yet supported on older versions of Chromium. This is why I made the change. I've made this change because I want to use Wayland, and I want to use Wayland with the NVIDIA proprietary driver so I can best make use of my hardware. I want to have a desktop environment that is widely developed, well-funded, well-supported, and lets me tile my windows, and finally lets me customize my desktop to the best of my ability. I think KDE is a place where I can settle down and call home. I did 6 years ago. I think I can now, and I'll let you know how it goes, and then watch me change my mind and go crawling back to GNOME a week later. Like this video if you want to support the proprietary NVIDIA driver on Wayland so more people can use it. All right, thank you for watching. See you all later. Have a great rest of your week.